So what if I told you there was a music job that paid like $35,000 to $75,000 a year, and your every day was just to work on music, to create arrangements, to work on parts for bands, to work on parts for singers, to sync that music to a whole production that's going on, and also to sync it to images and video. We love sync, right? We could sync stuff to video and text and images. And sometimes, most of the time, you are the featured artist on the stage. You'd be totally focused on music all week long, every week. And like I said, you get paid for this regularly, like every 2 weeks, like a real job. And you get taxes taken out and sometimes benefits. So you might be asking, Eric, what are these jobs? And why are you on location? Well, this week, we are in a place you might not expect to make music income. We are on a busy street, apparently, but we are also in front of a church. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, before you go running off, I'm going to talk to somebody who makes 90% of his income. He's also a composer. He's also doing music in sync and all kinds of stuff. But he makes his living at a church full-time and gets paid full-time by this church. And whether you're a person of faith or not, you need to hear what we talk about in this interview today. Jeez, it's like a racetrack. Is there a parade I don't know about? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric Copeland and welcome to Make Music Income. Today we are going to talk about a church music job and a church. That's right. You can work and do music at a church and get paid sometimes a full salary with benefits and taxes taken out, all that kind of stuff. No more having to keep your own taxes, running your own music business. No, you can work for a church that pays you the majority of your money that you need to live and pay your bills and support your family. I've done this for several churches in my life, and I may do it again someday. It can be a fulfilling job. It can be a crazy job. It can be a frustrating, life-giving, fun, challenging, amazing job. It's kind of like any job you do in the music business. And speaking of things you can do in music, as always, I have something free for you today. I want to give you my 50 ways to make music income. Yes, church music and jobs. There are quite a few things that you can do to make music income inside the church, and we talk about them in this video. So get our free ebook, 50 Ways to Make Music Income. You can find it right here at makemusicincome.com/free. There's all sorts of free stuff there. Get yourself some free stuff. And speaking of free, you can also join us at Streams. This is our free teaching community. We're about to reach 150 members there, and there is all sorts of free information and community there for you. So come on over to musicincomestreams.com and join for free. Come on in. The water's fine. I purposely saved this interview for right around Easter time. So let's go to church with Shane Jensen. Well, I am so happy and blessed today to be sitting here and talking to Shane Jensen, who is out in the Las Vegas area and at his church today. And we are going to talk about how Shane makes music income, but specifically this job as in church music direction, church music worship leading, church music job of any kind. There's quite a few ways it's described and things like that. But first, Shane, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, my name is Shane, and I live here in Las Vegas, Nevada, which I've been living here for over 30 years. So as we say here in this church, living in Sin City, we have kind of job security here at the church. So, but I grew up in Colorado. I was always very active in piano. I played for my high school choirs, and then went to university I got my bachelor's and my master's degree here at UNLV. In piano performance, and I have always had a love for music. Did a little composing. COVID kind of really woke me up to the world of production music and getting my music out there and everything else. And so it's been quite an interesting journey for the last 3 years, and I'm fortunate that I make a good portion of my income doing what I love, which is music and serving the Lord.
And fun fact, you're also a golf pro at some point, right?
That is correct. Yeah, in the midnight, I was a member of the PGA of America for about 10 years, and worked in Florida for a long time, Boca Raton area, Boynton Beach. So, a great time. Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's start with the question that I ask everybody, and I think it's pretty obvious by the point of this video and where you're sitting and what we're talking about today. But how do you make music income?
Well, I make it in a diverse number of ways. You know, I've always said that if you put all your eggs in one basket, you're probably not going to have a very large basket. So my main source of music income is here working through the church, which is extremely gratifying. Through my degrees, I work with opera singers and musical theater people here in the Valley. I'm also a music director. I did 2 shows this year. I did Violet and Cinderella, and I did Matilda last year. And so I have the opportunity to work on the Strip as well. So I work with people there. So I make it income there. Sheet music. I put sheet music up on Sheet Music Plus and Sheet Music Direct, and production music, you know, just getting involved in that side of thing, putting things up on Pond 5 and these different places. And so slowly that's starting to build. That's not something that's a major source of my income right now, but it's starting to grow, which it just takes a little time.
Very cool. And we're going to get back to some of those things after a little bit later here. So percentage-wise, the church job is what percentage of your income right now, would you say?
I would say the church job is probably about 75 to 80% of my income right now. I have been in full-time ministry, which I'm not an ordained pastor, but when you work at a church full-time, you're really in the ministry. And so I've been in full-time ministry for about 10 years now. So that's where the bulk of my income, and that's opened up so many doors for me being here in the church.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about, since, you know, this video, we will talk about some of the other things you do, but this video is focused on a church music job. So let's talk a little bit about what you do in your job. And the first thing you had mentioned here was instrumentation. That was the very first thing you wrote down. Why was that first?
Well, one of the things I think that's so important about you know, my background, I never played in a band when I was younger, which is kind of unfortunate because the tradition that I grew up in was mostly organ and very solemn type of activity. And so playing in a band wasn't really there for me. So when I started, I've been in ministry for about 15 years now. So when I first started 15 years ago, I didn't know anything about a guitar, drums, you know, how they were supposed to, you know, interact with each other. And over the last 15 years, I've grown to understand by just sitting in proximity. I mean, you can see how close the drum set sits to me back here. So I get to listen to them all the time. And the guitarist we have here, him and I are songwriting partners. So we're producing a lot of new music and new content, which I think is really, really important. But I get a glean off of him. What can the guitar do? Well, how can I write for this particular instrument? So, but from a praise team perspective, knowing which instruments you need to have, a drum, a bass, a guitar, a piano, is incredibly important. And through the church, I have learned to, embrace those instruments and how they function and what they do. There are times when we don't have our drummer. So how are we going to react in that situation? Well, we have one of our people here who plays the cajon, which can serve, as a percussion instrument that keeps the beat and moves forward. So it's working on the fly. What instrument can I use to replace another instrument, and how do we modify our instrumentation based on the staff that we have?
It's important for people to know. I think there are a lot of people, especially since my channel is watched worldwide, and I'm not sure that the contemporary band is used worldwide in churches. So especially across Europe, I would imagine that a lot of those churches may not be familiar with what even they see on your screen right now with screens and with drums behind you and with bass and everything. And I know in the church that I worked in for a while, I was brought in to introduce a drum set to the church because they didn't have one on stage and they were not ready for drums, and they just had piano and some guitar people playing along. And in order to integrate a full band into the church, we literally on the first Sunday just put the drum set on the stage with no player, just so they could get used to seeing it. But I think what people around the world need to know, who may not know this if they're not church goers or they don't have more contemporary churches, is that here in the States, most churches have gone to some kind of contemporary music service. And so instrumentation is a big deal. Like you said, I know lots of people I've worked with, clients, artists, that they did not grow up in a church. I didn't grow up in a church that had anything but my mother on the organ and Sharon over on the piano, and that was the entire musical section for the church besides the choir. There was nothing else unless there were bells one day or I don't know, somebody came in and played. Rarely did we ever see anything other than organ and piano for my entire early and teenage life. And so I think that drove a lot of people out of the church because they were like, okay, I don't want that kind of music when I go to the church. It's boring. So now things are not so boring anymore a lot of times at church, if not rock concert-ish. Your church probably is not like that, but...
Well, so I work at Mountain View Presbyterian Church, which is inside of a retirement community here in Las Vegas, Sun City, Summerlin. Cool. And this church has been here for about 35 years. So we have a very healthy music program here. We have an organ that we just bought, a new organ for here. We have a 5-octave handbell choir. In fact, they're going to be playing this weekend. We have... a praise team here. We don't use a lot of synths, which is probably kind of interesting to most people. I have a 9-foot Estonia grand piano that I get to play on, and fortunate enough to play on. We're slowly trying to bring in a few more synths, to create some different sounds. But what you say is exactly correct, Eric. The Presbyterians, their own title for themselves is the Frozen Chosen. And so bringing in a praise team, when Pastor Dendy, who's our pastor, who's been here for about 8 years now, first brought it in to bring in a praise team, there was a loud contingent, say, we don't want this, but it's grown to be a great addition to the church musical life. When I first started here, I was the gospel pianist. So we have a choir, and I used to play the piano for the gospel choir, and then that got morphed into the praise team. We still have a chancel choir that sings for one of our services. We have 2 services on Sunday, one traditional and one contemporary. And the only thing that's different about those 2 services is the musical selection. And you would, maybe you would believe, but music, the type of music, is such a contentious issue inside of the church. I mean, people have left churches because of the type of music that's actually programmed, which is unfortunate.
This very thing happened at the church. It's happened for the past 20, 30 years across America in churches or anywhere that churches have started to add percussion, especially to church music, because people just were not used to it. I mean, we're talking 100 or more years, hundreds of years that there was only organ, and then maybe pianoforte and piano became into the services, or maybe there was orchestral stuff back in the day, but I mean, long time ago, hundreds of years ago. But the organ, but once the organ came along, it kind of did the job, and then piano was added in, and then it was just that for a long, long time until the 90s, really, and when we started to integrate band stuff into these things. So a lot of people don't realize that, and I think a lot of people who are watching this video may not realize, again, they may not have been to church in a long while, and they don't realize that a lot of these churches not only have bands, but some churches, like Presbyterian churches, which are more conservative, and other Lutheran churches and other kind of offshoots of the Catholic Church a little bit that mix Catholicism and Protestant in a little way, that those churches need help by someone who can come in, and you have to be very careful and very slowly mix it in. And then, because there's going to be a lot of people that are like, what is all this noise all of a sudden? I've never had this in my entire life. And so
we have a lot of people who just the decibel level of the sounds that and the different timbres that you're getting from the sounds of a praise team as opposed to an organ really upset people at some points.
I have, and I'm sure you've seen people walk out until the music's over, and then they come back in because
Yeah.
we live in because those people were just not raised with this, and so they're not used to it. So, yeah, I think the whole band side of things is really interesting. We'll talk more about band as we go. Lead sheets. I know one guy recently, one of my clients, he took over a church, and he did not know that he was supposed to have not only like lead sheets, which are lyric sheets with chords over them, but also that there were some players who needed actual notes. They needed notes to play. They needed accompaniment, which is very difficult actually to blend players who read and players who play by ear. That's way more difficult than you would think it is sometimes.
Oh, it is, most definitely. One of the things, being a classically trained musician, one of the things that I wish I had an earlier experience to was reading lead sheets and being able to comp and improvise. Because
Explain lead
it's
sheets a little bit for
well,
people.
there's a couple of different ways lead sheets can work. Lead sheets we use here in this church, and we can talk about this a little later about where we actually get these lead sheets from. It's part of the licensing that we do. But the lead sheet that we use here, we have two options. We have three options. One, you can just have the lyrics with the chord symbols up on top of them. It's a lyric sheet. You can have a lead sheet which just has the melody line written into it and with the chord symbols up on top of that in a musical tablature form. Or you can have a lead sheet that has the melody line plus some supplemental harmonization lines for other vocalists with the chord symbols above it there. So we use a combination of both of those, the first two. Sometimes we'll give our bass player, they just want the lyric sheet because they don't want to be encumbered, because sometimes these songs get really long and you're flipping back and forth. And for a bassist or a guitarist who doesn't have an iPad where they can, flip through it with a foot pedal or whatever, it can be extremely difficult. So, but the lead sheet is the backbone of what we're doing in the praise and worship genre.
Well, my problem was that I had people who only read and they weren't comfortable. My mother was one of these who only read, and not even lead sheets with chords were helpful because they only really knew how to play 1-3-5 chords on the keyboard. And then this is mostly for keyboard players. This is almost for no one else. It's not for guitar players because they're used to reading chord symbols. It's not for drummers, obviously. It's not for bass players because they just can look at an F or whatever and play it. But absolutely. Piano players, organists who are switching over to contemporary keyboard, this is where your problem is because they don't know what notes to play. All they know is that they see F and they know a basic F triad, and that's all they know how to play, but they don't know how to play rhythm with that. And so some of them want to. I have had pianists who bring in their own charts of the song, but it's a different arrangement so that they can read the notes of the arrangement, but we're playing a different groove and they're trying to play the hymnal version of a song or some sheet music they found somewhere of the song, and it doesn't match. And so that can be trouble.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a tough one. And my recommendation to any keyboard player who doesn't know how to read the lead sheet, it is daunting and scary the first time, but go out and do it and just play basic, play root position C if you're playing a C chord, or G, F, whatever it is. You don't have to be too fancy. You'll develop that fanciness. Yeah. You'll develop how to harmonize, whether you're using first inversion, second inversion, or what note you're putting on the bottom of your chord, So that'll come.
And there are some music directors who will be savvy enough to play a piano part down and give you sheet music for that, but that's a lot of extra work for us because, as you know, we have to prepare. We're not Bach. We're not writing a cantata for every single service, but we are trying to prepare 5 songs, which is probably close to that, I guess, maybe. But if we have to actually write the parts down for a piano player to play, that's some work to do and make that basically you're making sheet music.
And there is a workaround for that, which I can talk to when we get to licensing, but there is a workaround to that.
All right, cool. So the next thing you have on here is sight reading. Does that go along with the lead sheets, or what do you want to talk about?
Let me tell you something. I think one of the reasons why I have been so successful as a pianist, whether it be accompanying, whether it be a music director, whether it be playing in my church, is my ability to sight read music on sight. A lot of classical players, they can't sight read, So if I'm going in and I'm playing musical theater auditions, I have to be able to sight read down a piece that I may have never even seen before. And it could be from Stephen Schwartz, it could be from Jason Robert Brown, so the ability has gotten me work because I have the ability to sight read at a high level. And it didn't come overnight. It's a skill that has to be practiced like anything else.
But that comes from your background with piano through your life, correct?
Well, I would say my degrees, as far as my college degrees, sight reading is not even taught. I know people that I went to master's school with who could not sight read a piece of music. It would take them 5 or 6 days to work up something like that. Yeah, so it's not a skill that's taught.
Yep.
I taught it to myself by sight reading down anthologies of Scott Joplin, ragtime, because there, like we've talked about, you have to move your hands without looking at the keyboard.
We'll talk about that here in just a minute, because we're going to get to the background that you have to have for the church. And I want to talk about your education and how you learned all the things you learned in order to do this job. Because, again, the reason I'm doing this whole video, folks, is because this is a job that is not just like a little income coming from Pond 5. This is a 5-figure income that can support your family and can support you, and is also a great, I think, and we'll talk about this again towards the end, how this benefits all the other things that you do. Now, we talked about lead sheets, and so let's go ahead and move into CCLI, praise charts, and licenses and things like that, because you have to have, if you don't know this, when we do pop music, I should say, church pop music, which is basically what's on the radio or what's been over the last 20 years, what has become popular music to do in the church, not just hymns, which stretch back into the 18 and 1700s and farther back, but current songs that have been written in the last 20 or 30 years that have become basically staples in modern worship in church. But there is something that we have to do to get use of that music and use it correctly as far as copyright and everything. Explain that a little bit.
So we have a number of different licenses that we have to have here. CCLI is the big one that we have that enables us to be able to, that CCLI and their partner Song Select are where we get all of our lead sheets from. So they have just a wealthy catalog of lead sheets that you can get from there. And if you ever stream something online, you'll always see at the end, you'll see the copyright material and you'll see a CCLI number that's at the bottom of that. And so that's extremely important, because Facebook will trample you like a herd of wildebeest with their copyright infringements if you don't have these things on there. So, and especially if you're playing something if your worship team is doing it, that falls under your license, but you just can't play other people's. I can't pull off a YouTube video off the internet and use my CCLI license for that.
Right.
So, but the workaround that I was talking about, so the CCLI, we have a CCLV, which is for videos that we can play. Then you have praise charts, and praise charts is one of the few licensing areas, and they all have fees associated with them. But you can get printed out copies of arrangements of songs, so you don't have to actually do the work as far as getting your keyboardist a thing. You can download it off of praise charts because they have so many of them on there. But they're pricey. They can be a little bit expensive, but there is a resource for that you can actually get from praise charts. So, but these licenses are extremely important.
Yeah, and the church pays CCLI per year. Or something.
Yes, it's a yearly fee that we pay CCLI, and that gives us like music stand and where you can have it on your iPad and whatever.
So think of CCLI as a church version of a PRO almost. They are paying the writers and the writers and or rights holders for the use of these songs in churches, and believe me, that is lucrative. Chris Tomlin has many homes because of CCLI, that all the churches who pay that use, and Chris Tomlin is a very well-known writer of, he literally almost single-handedly invented the current worship genre that we have, and has been very instrumental, so to speak, in that particular world. And he's an artist, Christian artist, but he was also a kind of progenitor of these worship song styles that we do now, and most of the style that we do.
And I will say this: I have I contacted CCLI about getting my own music onto there, my own leeches up there. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is
it's
to
hard.
actually get your music in there. You have to have like 10 unique churches
Yep.
request your song. So it's not like you can just throw your music up there and it's going to be, it's one of those, it's probably like a motion array in the way to get into some of these libraries.
Yeah, churches have to be asking to play the song. It's almost
Yes.
like the old days when a song spread from radio station to radio station in the 50s, and suddenly it became a hit because it was on so many radio stations. And this same thing works in the church now with CCLI. If there are 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 churches playing your music, then you can start to see an income stream there. And this is a whole nother income stream. I didn't even plan to include this as an income stream, but CCLI is basically another royalty income for Christian and/or faith-based composers and artists. So if that is you, but like Shane just said, it's not something that just happened. I don't even know if there's a company that you go through other than CCLI to do that. It's really
Not that I know. Yeah.
is still it has to be spread around. Sometimes this happens because churches hear something on the radio and they or on Spotify, and they request to be able to use on CCLI. And so you can then go check. And if you know you have a song that's been on Spotify that was a big hit, or it's been on the radio and churches are requesting it, then you can go to CCLI and sign up and get part of that income stream, I believe. That's how that works. Praise charts is one. There's also another one that I used at the last church I was at, and that was the one that came with the recordings and the tracks and the stems. What is that one called?
Oh, yeah. We don't use that here, but I know.
I can't remember the name of it. It's very, very popular. And they also have the charts, and they also have all the pieces, and they also are a monthly fee. And so it works great. On the days I didn't have a bass player, I could just turn the bass chart on, and we would play to the track in our headphones, and everybody played their instruments, and whatever was missing, I would just turn that track on. And so we had the multi-tracks, the stems, and so we could even use background vocals if we didn't have enough background singers that day. And you have to practice with those. You have to really practice with those. Whenever you're playing with tracks, you have to practice. But there are tools for us as music directors that don't require us to only have the ability to work with the band that we have. There are supplemental things that we can do track-wise.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about working with the band and working with singers. We were just talking about when you don't have band members in. One of the hardest things I've always found at churches to develop is guitar players. And singers we'll talk about singers in a minute because that's a whole different deal. But let's talk about band members and how hard it is or easy it is to find drummers, bass players, and guitar players and keyboard players.
Yeah, it's really hard. I have been fortunate enough here at Mountain View where I have been able to work with two really, really strong guitarists. And so they have really stepped up and been able to fill in gaps where we needed to have them done. One of the things too that we do is sometimes we will harvest musicians from the congregation, and a lot of times they may not be professional musicians, and so there's a learning curve. Like our current drummer that we've had now here at the church is one of our congregants, and he's not a professional musician, but he has come so far in the last 8 or 9 years that he's really become an asset to our thing. But it's a training process that takes a long time, because if you've never played in a band or you've never done anything like that, there is coordinating, the listening aspects of it, coordinating, with all of these different things, really is a skill, and it's a talent. So finding those people within inside of your congregation, getting them to stay around long enough where they're not moving out or whatever it is always a constant battle for us.
And I got lucky at the church that I was introducing drums to the congregation with. Is the one drummer that I had in the church that I knew, he was just coming back to drums. So he played very tentatively, which actually was good for us. And I started him on brushes. instead of sticks, so that the drums would not be too loud. And then eventually we moved up to rods, which are kind of between brushes and sticks, and then full sticks as we got more. Everyone was more comfortable, which nobody really became comfortable, but we did the best we could. And so work, and then while we're talking about players, have you ever paid for players to play for your band? This is something that I haven't done personally, but I know a lot of churches are doing this these days.
Yes, we do pay. I think there's 3 of us on our praise team who are actually employees of the church. The rest are volunteers because they just love what they do. But yes, we do. Here in Las Vegas, actually, singers will actually, there are churches that actually pay singers to fill out their, their professional singers to fill out their choirs and stuff like that. So in this city, and that's really denomination specific, I must say. Not every church will pay musicians.
It'll probably depend on the size too of the church.
Yeah.
But this is another income stream. If you are a singer, player, you have any background in faith, and you want to, and you're looking for additional income. Now, we're not talking like, thousands of dollars a month. We're talking about $50 to $100 a service probably, or a day or something like that. I don't know.
Unless you're an organist. Let me tell you something. Those organists get paid like $175 a service.
Yes, they do, and for weddings, and for funerals, and everything else.
Yeah.
Because organists are like one-man band people. They use all their limbs when they play. You have to play pedals. You have to play volume pedal. You have to play 2 different things. You have to play stops and all the sounds. And so, an organist is somebody. But that's what I wanted to just point out, that this could be an income for those of you who are out there who are musicians, who are a local church that needs help, and they do employ musicians, and this will also work on other technical things we'll get to. But let's talk about singers for a minute. What do you have to say about singers in the church?
Well, I have been working with singers for 35 plus years, and so sometimes I call it working with singers as Indiana Jones running through a jungle with machetes, because you never know what is going to happen when you're working with a singer. I mean, they will skip. I remember one time I was playing up at a classical music seminar up in Big Bear, California, and we were doing a piece called Gretchen am Spinnrad, which is by Schubert. It's a It's a really difficult song, and it's all the same throughout the 6 or 7 page piece of music. The singer skipped like 3 pages of music, and so we had to find where the singer was. And so this is why sight reading becomes so important, is that you've got to, if your singer is missing an entrance or is jumping or whatever, that you really have to be on your game to find out where they are. Now, over 30 years of playing company with singers, I've gotten used to it, and so I do it. But singers can really also enhance the interpretation of your song too. I mean, there's some things that they can do. If you're doing pop music and you have a singer who's more classical oriented, that's going to maybe detract from what you're doing. If you have a pop singer who's doing classical, so finding that right singer can be a difficult task. But once you find that, hold on to them, because they're very valuable for the emotional experience that you're giving your worshipers, which ultimately is what we're trying to do, is give the worshipers an emotional experience.
Yeah, and that is true. Speaking of that, I have something that I didn't make up, but it's a great thought, that when you're talking about church music, and from the job of being up on the stage trying to lead, our goal is to lead the people in singing and in worship. And so our goal, supposedly, just like the pastor's goal, is to enrich the people by leading them into a worshipful experience in the church. And especially the praise team is doing this. We're warming them up for the message. We're getting them ready, and we're getting them in the spirit and in the mood. And we often think, those of us on the stage in a church, and this actually kind of goes, we think like concert material, like we're in concert at an arena and God is giving us this talent and we are sharing it with the people. And there's this L that comes from heaven down to us because we're superstars and going out to the audience. And maybe that's true for Beyonce or for some star like that. Yes, they are God-given talent going out to the audience. But that's not actually the way the L goes. The L actually goes from us, not that we're God, but we are just the people. We are what was described to me as prompters. We're not God. We're not worship people. We are just the prompters to the worshipers to get them to go up to God. So the L goes from us to the congregation and up to God, and that is the way that worship was described to me, and that makes so much sense. And when I told my team that, they were like, "Oh, we were all blown away by that concept. That it's not coming from God and our responsibility to then share that with the people. We're not priests. We are just musicians that are trying to get people then to look up to God."
It's an interesting thing because I'm sure one of the big controversies inside of church music is what we do on stage a performance or is it worship?
Yep.
And I fall on the perspective of that it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, sure.
Because the worship experience, I need to have it at a professional quality level in order to not disrupt the worship experience that I'm giving to the parishioners that I have out here. Meaning that if I'm hitting wrong notes or I'm off key or I'm not in time or whatever, that's going to affect the message that's going to be given to the worshipers. So the more polished your performance is, the more that's going to impact a better worship experience for your congregants.
How different is that than what the pastor does? Is he not half entertainer sometimes? I
think so.
The pastor has to be half stand-up comedian, half good storyteller, and then half pastoral persons giving out and praying and all the kind of stuff. So it's the same deal for his job as well.
What's so funny you bring that up is because our motto, one of our mottos here is laugh often and fear not. Yeah. And so Pastor Dendy bills himself as the world's funniest pastor. And he actually does stand-up comedy. He actually goes around the country and does stand-up comedy. We've had comedy shows here in the sanctuary and stuff like that. And so, some people have a very solemn, when they get into the worship experience, it's a very solemn experience for them. Some, want to make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And so that's the way that he has brought with us, is that it should be, an emotional, rewarding, solemn, and fun experience all at the same time.
And in case you don't know, there are plenty of Christian comedians that go around doing stand-up comedy. John Christ is one of them. There are tons of them, and they've been around for a long time. And they basically kind of preach through comedy. It's not preaching. It's just observation, like most stand-up comedy is. But it's giving out just things to think about as far as the church or church people, especially church people. But
fertile ground.
God protect me from your followers.
Right.
So, all right. So we've talked about singers and musicians being paid and how important that they are. And we could do a whole video just about singers and issues and things like that. But we're not going to do that. We're going to get as far as, because that's a big part of our job, making sure everybody's happy, stroking all the egos, and/or I ran a church where the problem wasn't egos. The problem was a disturbing lack of narcissism. I couldn't get anybody to actually have an ego on the stage. They were just so quiet and stuff like that. And so sometimes you have that problem. But the other thing that we have to think about in these services is the sound, is the technical side of things. And that's another big part of us, and another thing that if you are a talented engineer, live engineer, can be something for you to do inside the church. And guess what? Also, another possible music income. Talk about sound and considerations.
Yeah, sound is so important to how the praise team functions. So we have two soundboards here. One for our back of house where we do all of our streaming at, and one for the front of house where we mix that. And so a good sound person can really make or break what it is you're doing, making sure that they're mixed properly, making sure that we have the microphones in the right place, making sure that there's so many things that go into not just us playing the instrument, but to getting that sound out to the individuals. And so it's something that I didn't know much about, and I will say it has impacted other areas of my compositional uh, abilities. Mixing and mastering has become so much more fluid and intuitive because of what I do here at the church and my understanding how sound actually works because of working with the praise team and with competent professionals who actually do our sound here and what we need to focus on.
And it's not just sound, because every church now has a very big video component. Not only just putting up slides, which it used to be, but now there's videos that go along with the church. A lot of churches use video announcements, or we show video clips. And so, and then there's a whole second thing. But so yes, you could be someone who comes in and is part of that team, but there's another part of that team now. There used to just be sound, and then there was sound and video because we had to put the words up on the screen for people to sing to now, because we don't use the hymnals anymore necessarily always, at least not in most contemporary churches. And now. And then, but there's a third component, and that is streaming out to an internet audience, which is how I go to church right now. I know a lot of people go to church this way. My wife and I, the church we like is an hour and a half away. So it's easier for us to sit on the couch and watch the service from there. And the pastor actually says, shout out, let's give a big round of applause for our online audience today. Talk about streaming and what that involves.
So we here in Las Vegas now. This may come to a surprise for some people. We have about 500 members here at our church, and that in the United States, that is considered a large church.
Yeah.
500 people is a large church. Now we see these Joel Osteens and Central Christian Church have 20, 30,000 members. Those are the outliers. But the average church probably only has 80 to 90 members out of it.
Yep.
We're at 500. So. And having been fortunate that I've been here, since about 2010, almost 13 years here at the same church. I saw it pre-COVID and what happened, and we've had a struggle to try to get members back into the pews. And so one of the things that we had to do, we streamed prior to COVID, but COVID really made us up our game as far as what we were having to stream. So. And that's pretty intensive, because what's going on in the sanctuary is not what they're hearing on the stream. It's a whole different mixing board that they have to do back there. So the online presence has really become much more crucial post-COVID, because more people are saying, I can just watch church from home. And I can just, experience the same things that are going on there. But then that creates a lot of problems for us who are actually here. And how is our sound going over there? Is everything mixed correctly? So it's a whole different ballgame. So from my perspective, if I'm a college student and I'm doing a music production program or doing something like that, I would go get to the nearest church that I could find and say, hey, do you have any opportunities for me to be able to mix and come in here on Sundays? And there may be a compensation to it. There may not be, depending on the size of the church. But that is incredible ground for a sound person to get some intern hours.
We push that all the time. And as a matter of fact, many of our teachers are already doing that as side income on Sunday mornings. They go and run sound at churches. But so there's officially 4 roles. Even in the church I had, what you said about churches, most people don't realize that the average church has only about 100 or less members in the United States, probably in the world. But you see all these mega churches. But even at a church where we only had 100 to 200, we did an online service, or at least we recorded the video. But we got to streaming during COVID. Of course, we had to, and everybody had to. That was the only way we were legally allowed in some
Yeah,
ways
yeah.
to do church. And so that, but we were doing it before that. Many churches were doing it long before that. But there's four roles. There's the audio guy who's doing the church audio, the front of house, we would say. And he's also doing back of house, which is headphone mixes and stuff like that. Then we have the video person. And some churches may have a lighting person, may just control lighting only if there are a lot of lighting changes. And then you have the person who's controlling the stream going out, and sometimes that's a separate audio mix that they are listening to in headphones and making sure is right. And then you have the person who is communicating with everybody in the congregation online. Oh, glad you're here today, and communing back and forth. So there is a lot of technical things going on. The bigger the church, the more technical things going on. Some churches have a 3-camera setup with 3 big cameras set up around the church where they have 3 different persons, and they have a producer up in the booth that's talking to each of those guys. All right, go camera 1, go camera 2, go camera 3. I mean, there are some technical setups here in these churches, folks. And if you are at all technical, and these are paying positions most likely, I would say these all, especially if the church is 500 or larger as in its congregation, and most churches like this would be over 1,000 in their congregation that are doing 3-camera setups. There's tons of jobs there. There's tons of income there for you to work in the church. So just something that I want to keep kind of stressing here.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've talked all about that kind of stuff, and we talked about lead sheets at the top. Talk a little bit about picking music, and I don't think a lot of people realize they go to church and they hear these songs being done. They say, "Oh, you do these songs all the time, so it must be easy just to choose a few songs and do them." It's not like the church used to be 100 years ago where they'd have 3 hymn numbers up on the side of the board, and they'd say, "These are the 3 hymns today," and people would just get the hymnal that was right there in the pew, and they would go to that thing. Wasn't much to it, but now there's a lot to it as far as putting together a musical service for that day.
Yeah, and there are whole books written on this particular subject. You could fill a whole library on the liturgy about what's going on inside of the church. I have a couple of rules that I use when I'm trying to select music for a worship service. The first criteria I have is what scripture is this particular song based off? And if you can tell what scripture it's based off, it's probably okay for the church setting. And if it's not based on scripture, then the second question I would ask is, what is the source material that this is coming from? So if it's coming from, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, nothing wrong with that, love it, but it's probably not appropriate for the worship setting.
Are you saying when I did Pink Floyd's Money, that was not right for the
Unless
the
it's
service?
a stewardship campaign. If it's a stewardship campaign, you're probably okay.
It was a message about money, probably from the First Timothy thing we talked about.
Yeah. So, but you really have to be conscious of what you're actually programming for the word. It was easy in the old days when you just had a hymnal and you were able to just select something from the hymnal.
Yeah,
you're going to be safe there. But now we have got so many, especially with the modern contemporary music, we have got so many, I'm probably not going to do something by Marvin Gaye, in my church service. So it's really important. And you would be surprised, just one person will complain about some particular song over there, and it just, spreads like wildfire, so it's tough, but if you stick by a set of rules when programming for this particular setting, you're going to be okay. Scripture, what's the source material, and then does it fit in with the message? I mean, some people think I get sermons until I think I have all the sermons through the end of the year. So then we program our music around that. Yeah. I mean, my pastor is really, he's one of the greatest.
I've never had a pastor who knew. Sometimes he had a theme for a few weeks, but I never knew day by day what the actual message was going to be on. Sometimes we would have a Tuesday meeting and he says, "I think Sunday I'm going to talk about this, but I won't write it till Saturday night." So you are totally guessing on what.
No, we have. So I've known. So like we just finished up a series on the Sermon on the Mount, which went for like 6 months. But we have also 3 preachers who preach here too. We've got the senior pastor, we've got our director of family ministries, and we have our director of men's ministries and missions. So we have 3. So they schedule it out 6 months out in advance. We just finished up one on Sermon on the Mount. We're moving into another. I forget what the subject matter is, but I have all of the, the scripture, what the title of it's going to be, and everything else planned out for 6 months so that we can create a cohesive, music message, theme of the worship service to create an overall cohesive experience.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a blessing because, like I said, I've worked for pastors who literally write their sermon on Saturday night. We'll just see what God says to me, type of thing.
How the Spirit moves me, how it moves me.
Oh boy. So I just have to put together some songs that are. But the best way to do it is when I first started my last job, we would have a Monday meeting, and we didn't have. There was an idea of what we were doing as far as a series or something like that, but we would say, what is our goal for this service to develop a nice flow from the music right into the special music. If we do a special, we haven't really talked about that, but if we do a special solo from someone or a special group or a choir verse thing, or the kids come up and sing a song, or some handbell choir or things like that, or whatever. There's different things in different churches. But if we have a special that we do, and then it goes right, I've been in churches that do dramatic pieces, whether they're comedy pieces or they're really super drama. I once did a 3-piece thing where they did a dramatic reading. It was a solo reading, a girl strapped to a chair, and she was talking about how she is completely paralyzed in her life, and she was in a straitjacket in a chair and read this very dramatic thing, and then the light went off of her and came onto me and a singer, and we did a song that was very stark and very moving, that a song I had written for just that thing, and it was called I can't remember what it was called, but it was something that related to that. And then the light went off of us, and it went on the pastor, and he started his message, and it was a very tied together special kind of performance, which we did that in the 90s. That barely happens anymore in churches. We're a little bit more staid, and 5 songs and a sermon and a cloud of dust is what I call it.
Yeah. Have you ever done liturgical dance?
Yes, absolutely. We've been in church.
Yeah,
I've been in churches that have dance.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And mixed all that stuff together. And I wish you don't see that as much in churches these days. We've kind of locked into this modern worship set of songs and then a message, and that's about the service, and I lament that we don't do all that art in the church as much anymore. Maybe you do, but it's not happening in a lot of the churches I see. So,
not much here.
I'm not sure everybody cares about that. So, well, I'm serious. I've talked to my friends about it, and they're like, I don't care about all that fancy stuff. And so maybe people just want, the meat and potatoes. So you had written down the value of being on a praise team. What does that mean?
So I think that there are so many values of being on a praise team. One, it's just getting to work with other musicians on a weekly basis and getting to know that dynamic. Our guitarist is top notch. He's a professional player, and some of the things that he can do on his guitar with some of these pedals that they have down there, the whale sounds and everything else that they can get going, it's really pretty intense. How to write for instruments, just being able to pick the brain of my fellow instrumentalists here has really been a great benefit for me.
It's no different from being in a band. Like if you're in a band with friends, or band with a band that's touring, or a band that's working every weekend, and you have that camaraderie, you have that growth from playing with other people. We've got to get out of our homes and play. A lot of the people watching this video, if they're even watching by this point, are people who, we all have our little studios here at home. We all have our little caves, and we work in our caves, in our little laboratories, I call it, and we don't go up out into the world and play with others. And that was the first step for me in making real income in the world, is to go out and start going to studios, working in churches with other people, being in groups with people, and being in a team at a church is just like that. It's just like being in an orchestra or being at school. A lot of you watching this may be like, say, man, when I was in school, I was there with other musical people and we had musical interests together. We could share stories and I could learn from them. And I don't think people realize that can happen in a church music environment and team like that.
Well, I think that also, I think one of the things that's such a blessing about being in the church is the diversity of experiences that I get. Yeah. I don't know whether I'm going to have to play from the hymnology. I don't know whether I'm going to have to play, I have to play a lot of solo piano stuff for communion, for prelude, for postlude. I might have to play for a wedding or a funeral. I might have to play for a fellowship hour or any of these numbers. And so I have to have a lot of different styles and types of music, available under my finger that I'm able to meet the needs of a diverse population of people who have different needs within the church community.
So many, as the leader of this, as the director of this, it is so multifaceted that you wouldn't believe of the things that you have to do. And that may scare some people who are listening to this going, oh, I couldn't do that job. And you know what? Maybe you're right. I mean, there's a lot to it. This is more than even just being a conductor of an orchestra. It's more than just being someone who gets people together to practice. It's more than just being a performer and a soloist. It's all of those things. And it's also being a psychiatrist and being a fireman and being a person who knows how to handle emergencies, because every Sunday there is going to be something that doesn't work for no apparent reason. Just one piece of the board is going to go out. There's going to be wiring that's wrong. There's going to be a microphone that's dead. There's going to be some reason. I don't hear this, and it worked perfectly in rehearsal 2 days ago or yesterday, and today it's not working. It's the devil is not only in the details, he's sometimes in the tech and in the stuff, and we are always fighting that war.
We're constantly fighting, with monitor mixes and in-ear mixes and all these different, they change from what we do on Thursday night to what we do on Sunday morning. I mean, it's like the soundboard gremlins are in there doing that. But I will say to those of your viewers who are thinking that this is just a lot of information, understand that, I've been in music ministry for 15 years. I didn't just jump right in and was a music director on that. I didn't just, stick my lips over on the fire hydrant and say, go ahead, turn it on, but it's a process. Start out as just the keyboard player, watch, learn, and see what you do. And then gradually you move into these other areas where it's not such a fire hydrant of water just coming right at you.
So everybody is going to be watching this from a different place in the world. As you know, we have people watching in Germany and in Switzerland, and we talk to them personally all the time, actually. And they're part of our conversations, and they're all over Europe and all over the world, Australia and everywhere. So everybody is going to have to deal with their particular area that they live in and what church is like there. But talk for a minute about working for a church in Sin City, of all places on the earth. Tell me a little bit about the challenges there.
It's interesting because I think people have this conception that all of us spend all of our time down on the strip in the casinos, gambling and smoking cigars and doing whatever it is. But that is really a very small portion of what this city is all about. This is such a diverse community over, there's 20 miles on either side of the strip that is just filled with homes and houses. We have a very large Mormon contingent here in the valley. In fact, they're building their second temple here in the valley. So it's a growth. But yes, we do deal with a lot of, we have the homeless teenagers. We support Project 150. We have a lot of homeless that come in here. They need to use our facility to be able to, charge their wheelchairs or whatever it is that they need to do. We have homeless care packs out there that we can give to our congregants and they're able to pass them out to the homeless. And, we take people where they are. here in the city. No, we're all flawed individuals. And so knowing that you can come into a comfortable space where you're not going to be looked at it in a different way. And, I wrote a song called The Foot of His Cross, in which it says that all are the same at the foot of the cross. No, there's nothing, no one greater is going to get into the kingdom because they have more things, or they have, it's how you actually treat people and how you're actually in their, we often joke that we have job stability here in Sin City, but this city really is no different than any other city on the planet. We have a diverse community. We have believers, a strong believers community here, and so it's interesting though.
I almost think that, and I agree. I know people who have lived in Pahrump and all sorts of places right around there, and they're just living in neighborhoods. They don't live in the Strip is the Strip in the same way that you go to Clearwater Beach and the Strip is there, and then you drive across the bay and then you're in homes and regular stuff.
Yeah.
But everybody in the world is going to have a different religious thing going on in their area. I know in Europe it's a completely different church than it is here in the States. And so that might be an opportunity for you, wherever you are, in the States, in any other country, to find a way to serve and to maybe be employed by a church helping them run their music and run their music team. No matter if that's just you playing the piano and singing. I've had jobs where I've only just been myself. Like there were some Sundays where one of my pastors I worked for just said, just do this, just do it yourself, just play and sing. No other body on the stage. To the point where or full orchestra. There are churches I've been to in Nashville that have full orchestras and full band and full singers and everything going on. And so there's a lot to do. So, all right, well, let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about some of the backgrounds needed to do this job. Because I think those of you listening to this video or watching this video, you might be thinking, I'm not sure I'm able to do that job. How would I qualify to be able to go work at a church? And so I think there's three main things, and let's attack the first one, which I think is pretty obvious, I would think, but I'll let you say why, and that is faith in general, and a background in faith.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been a believer since I was young. My parents didn't necessarily go to church. They didn't hinder me from going to church. So I have been a believer for a long time. And I really find that God gave me the abilities that I have to, worship him but it's really important to have that faith base. Now, we do ask for a statement of faith when we here at the church on the application, but we have hired people
who weren't for players and singers, or just for the employed positions?
That's just for the employed positions.
Okay.
So we have employed people here who weren't necessarily far down the road on their walk with Jesus, but through being associated with church and coming to church every week, that faith has deepened and grown. So the prerequisite is you've got to believe in God, if you want to work in a church environment and have faith. But how deep that is, that's not for me to say, but that's going to grow and strengthen just by being around the positivity, just listen to music. I am so fortunate because as I'm sitting here at my keyboard, we have a giant cross that's sitting up here. And that is what all of my music is about, is what Jesus has done with that cross. And so, yes, faith is extremely important if you're going to work in the church environment. The depth of that faith, I'm not so sure. That's going to deepen, I think, with anyone who comes into a church. We all come to the church from different places. Some of us have had bad experiences with the church, and we just need to find that right church home. So, that's just my thought.
I always have felt, and I've also been a believer since I was a kid. It's just always been in my brain. My mother was the church organist from before I was born. I was in the nursery at the church the moment I was born, and stayed there till I was 18 years old. Every Sunday, Wednesday, we were at the church. It's where I lived half of my life growing up. For me personally, it all just made sense, and it still does, and that's how I live my life. But anyway, all that to say, I have also had many people I've employed or brought into teams that I wasn't sure where they were on their faith. And I almost didn't care, including members of my own family, my brother sometimes, or people that I weren't sure where their walk was. But at the same time, there's no better place for them to be as far as using their gift or their talent than right there and doing good. It's kind of like if you have a talent to serve people in some way, then you should be serving people in some way. And there's all sorts of ways you can serve them. But I've had engineers in the studio that weren't people of faith that became people of faith after working with me and a lot of artists, Christian artists,
Absolutely.
and different things like that. And so to me, I was fine. And I've always been fine with having people of different beliefs, even different religions working together, and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, if you want to lead, you want to go in and take a job where they're paying you $50,000 to lead the worship and do other jobs in the church or something, then yeah, you're likely going to have a background in faith. It's not going to be a job you can walk into and say, I'll check into it and see if it works for me.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to lead, it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're just going to be a behind-the-scenes player, that walk might not be as strong. And let me just say, that walk is not a straight path. I've been in the Mirkwood Forest. I have been in there, and now I have come back out and then back on the path. But all of us go to the Mirkwood Forest at some time in our lives.
Yeah,
so
it's a long walk, folks. There's no such thing as perfect Christians and perfect people. Perfect churches aren't. You may feel like you walk into a church and everybody is perfect, and you are not. But it's not the way it is, and that's why I always don't worry about if this drummer today is like the guy who is the perfect guy, and the perfect God follower. So know that that's not always a prerequisite to serve at a church and to offer your services and even be paid as a sound person, because that's not always needed. Now, what about your personal music journey? How did that inform you to be able to do all these things that you do at this church?
Well, I think that it's given me a little bit of a leg up having a master's degree and going through all that formal education. But I've always said I learned more about my professional career after I actually got out of my master's degree. And so it benefits me in the fact that I'm able to read music very well. I'm able to coach other people on how to get the most out of their instruments, how to be expressive, and how to channel some of these different kinds of things. So it's my, growing up in the church and, being just really immersed in music has really helped me a lot to perform at the level that I do here at the church, and whether that's from, writing my own songs or, arranging hymns or doing whatever it is, I have the ability to do that and share those with the congregation, which is one of the great things about being at a church, Eric, is that you have an audience who is really thirsting for what you're going to provide them next. And there's such an appreciative audience. You can do a hymn setting of, Were You There or Near the Cross, and they're just saying, wow, that was the most amazing thing that I've ever heard. So don't discount the types of people that you're going to meet with inside of this building who are going to encourage you and really appreciate the music that you're doing.
I was lucky that growing up, my songwriting talents and my synthesizer playing talents in the 70s and 80s were appreciated by my music pastor, and of course my mother was the organist, and so it's not that I had an into the group. Everybody had an into the group because our church was based around our gigantic youth choir that we had, but I was involved in that. But I also was writing songs and arranging songs and was able to bring those to the church, and then those were I brought that to every church I've served at or worked at. And yeah, being able to sit down and do a new arrangement that you have and share that music with people is pretty cool. And having those talents certainly helps. And most people watching this right now are able to make music, and you can take that music and use it in the church, and that may even transfer to a job and an income stream that that may be some or part or all of your income. So I think having that background. But I will tell you that I think getting I went back, I've been in college for more years than most people ever would have dreamed of going to college, because I went to college the first time when I was 18 and all till about 22, and then again for a couple of years after that, and then went back to and finished my bachelor's in my late 40s, and then my master's in my 50s. And I found that was really helpful to be able to. I believe that the person in charge of music in any situation, but especially in the church, and probably any kind of orchestral, classical, or anything, where a teacher or whatever, you need to be one of the smartest people in the room. I'm sorry, but you need to have the knowledge that comes from learning about music history, that comes about, I mean, the church music, knowing things about Bach and about other very big musicians in the church through those days. But Bach is a perfect example of someone who lived a life, and his whole existence and pay came from the church, basically. And everybody thinks, oh, Bach, he must have been so famous. He was never famous. He worked at a church for all that time. And
I will say that, and maybe this is just my vacuum that I work at here in Las Vegas in the church, that most of the people who are in leadership positions at the churches that surround us and here all have postgraduate degrees.
Yeah.
And I maybe that's just coincidence. I don't think that, necessarily opposed. If you're going to be a session musician in Nashville, I don't know if that's necessarily required to have a master's degree. And then some of them actually probably are much better without a degree.
And they have no degrees.
But in the church setting, I think that there are benefits and lends a bit of a credibility to have that education behind you.
Absolutely. It just helps. It helps to have all of that, to know about theory things. And yes. it's a lot of theory. When you take it, you think, I'll never use this again. Like math, because I think of theory as math. I call it math class, theory class. But you will, and it's good to know about how to not use certain things, parallel fifths and things like that just you could do it a different way and it'll sound better. And that kind of knowledge is helpful. All right, so that faith, obviously, and your personal music background and education, I think are three prerequisites that are going to help. They're not and most of them are pretty mandatory. So let's switch gears again here and talk about, we're almost done here, how does the church benefit other things that you do? I know you are an active composer. You're in our Composers Mastermind right now and have been in several of those. And you're involved with Dave Croft over at 50 Qs and just about all the different writing and composing communities, just like I am. And also a very accomplished and active arranger, which is something that we really need to talk about more on this channel, is arranging. But you also have let's talk about how those things are affected by working at the church. As it's your job, but it also probably initiates a lot of things that you end up using as a composer or an arranger.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're in the church, you're exposed to such a wide variety of music that you glean certain things, whether that's a particular chord progression. I glean interesting things from the praise charts that I look at every single week. Well, that's a great chord progression. That's an F over a C chord. That's really an interesting harmony or something like that. How songs are structured. When you look at a praise song that we do, you see the form. Is this a verse, pre-chorus, chorus, type of song, and where's the bridge fall in there? Does it even have a bridge? Am I doing just an A form song? So the structure, if you really dive into it and get in there, what type of different accompaniments can I use in my left hand that will help to amplify these different things? And I can use those in my arranging compositions, the standard way that I would want to arrange something. So many things impact what I do as a composer and arranger. Is this going to work in this particular setting? Is this not going to work in this particular setting? Is all influenced by the music that I'm exposed to every single day here in the church at maybe a more minute level, than what you might get in other environments. And maybe that kind of taints my writing too. It kind of skews my writing in one way, whereas if I was maybe in a jazz idiom, it might skew to a different way. But a lot of the music that I am exposed to every day is relatively not overly complex music. And I think that that's what people thrive for in the church environment, just something that they can grasp onto emotionally.
Well, for me, I think the church work has benefited my composition because it's made me literally have to compose and arrange 4 services. In other words, it's been the great initiator. So have clients. If I didn't have that service coming up that the pastor said, let's do a thing about a girl in a straitjacket, and then I need a song to go with that, and it needs to be a real emotional, I wouldn't have written that song. If I knew I didn't have to fill a certain thing with a certain piano arrangement that I wanted to do because it was Easter and I knew it's a blah, 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 I wouldn't have come up with an arrangement for whatever Easter song that I made. Right. So it's been a lot of people on this channel always lament the fact, I don't have enough songs. I don't have songs. How am I going to think about songs and come up with songs? Let me tell you, when you have to have songs ready, this is how Bach has a catalog that is huge. It's because he had to have new music ready every week. It was a great initiator for him. We have many tunes by Bach because he had to have it ready for the next week.
Absolutely.
And so that's, to me, that's where I have, if you just look at my catalog, I list on my catalog who was the initiator, who was the client or whatever. And a lot of it is just the churches that I worked at and had to come up with the song for.
Yeah. I think prior to about 1750, most music was written for the church setting.
Yeah.
So, and everything that we have, Bach prior was written for the church setting. So that's absolutely, it is a motivator to get more things actually done. Yeah, I think that's exactly correct.
And there are other things now because we're writing for libraries, we're writing for Spotify releases, we're writing for ad clients and things like that need us to write for. But the church can be a great initiator of those. It also and therefore you've just released a whole album of hymn arrangements, or were they originals? The one you just released.
The one I just released, the Frozen Longing, was all originals, original songs. I'm working on the hymn album now, which I'm hoping within probably by November that'll be up and ready to go.
Any of those initiated by the church needed that for a service?
Absolutely. These were all started because we were doing a Lenten series. We were doing a Lenten lunch, and the pastor wanted me to arrange songs for Lent. Yeah. And so I arranged, we did 7 weeks. We had a lunch, we had a worship service. I did a new hymn arrangement, and we went and had lunch here at the soup lunch here in the fellowship hall. And that's exactly where that stemmed from. They said I had
so basically they were church briefs, basically.
Yes, pretty much.
Just briefs that you filled for service coming up.
Yeah,
very good. Speaking of briefs, I don't think people realize when you have another job, and I've gotten criticism, believe it or not, for having this channel or for working a school job. Since I took the job at that school, I've gotten criticism on this channel for taking a job teaching instead of doing more music. And I've even gotten criticism of doing this channel instead of doing more music. Like, I'm not doing 20 times the amount of music that they are making anyway, because as you know, my output is large, and because you're in these things and you see what I'm writing, but I still do all these other things, and that's just because I'm terribly driven. It's like a problem, but it is working in the church. It's not that it just initiates songs. It initiates songs that could end up going to licensing, could end up going to my sheet music place, and yours do, and could end up going to streaming,
Sure.
And so it initiates all those things. Do you find that for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I find that I have to keep my mind engaged, so I've got to do a whole number of different kinds of things. I mean, I can't put all my eggs in one basket. When you look at it, Schubert only wrote about 650 songs. So if the whole nature of what we consider composing has really changed in the 20th century and beyond, where 600 songs that Schubert outputted was a huge catalog of songs that he was writing. So it's not so much about the quantity of what you're putting out there, but it's the quality of what you're putting out there. And every experience that I have, whether it be teaching or whether it be working in the church or whatever, it gives me a different way of thinking about maybe a musical problem that I need to solve from someone who has a different perspective or someone who does something different for me. And so that's why I engage in teaching. I do master classes here. I coach singers and all these different kinds of things, and all of them bring something that I'm going to be able to learn from and put into my music to make it better.
Yeah, and so licensing, it gets helped by that. Sheet music gets helped by that. Streaming gets helped by that. Your audience of you as a composer or as a piano
Absolutely.
player all get helped by that. And it's not like we're doing church work for personal gain, but it just is kind of like a result, just like initiating compositions. So that's great. Well, man, is there anything we haven't discussed yet about that you get from working with this job? Talk about, just to wrap us up here, tell me about how you personally feel about this job. Does it, at the end of the day, when you look at your life right now, and because I have feelings about this, when you look at your life at the end of the day and you say, if I died tomorrow, how do you feel that this job at the church has affected and or reflected on your life?
I think that working in the full-time ministry for about 10 years now has really it's put me at peace. Working in the church, there's not this anxiety. I don't have, certainly there are probably other jobs that I could do where I could make more money that might be a lot more stressful or do whatever it is. But I am extremely happy with the people that I work with the environment that I work in. It's a pretty low stress environment that I'm in. And those things in the long run are valuable for my health. But to just then my daily connection with God that most people don't have. Most people have a connection with God maybe on Sunday. I have a 7-day a week where I am in the church 7 days a week, and it's constantly on my mind. That creates an incredible sense of peace.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the biggest benefit. It's not a monetary thing, because I could certainly go start my own private teaching studio and make, $150,000 a year. But I just like the sense of peace that I'm accomplishing something, that people are enjoying my music, that I'm sharing it with them, that it's creating in them, moving their eyes towards God. And so that for me makes up for some of the maybe not so monetary things that I have. And that's what working in the church does for me.
Yeah. Great. And I've felt that too in my life, especially either when I worked in the church and or worked for artists who were doing Christian music or where I am currently, which is doing, making music that I feel is positive, that's making hopefully a positive change in people's lives, whether they're believers or not. I feel I have felt that in my life. And so good. That's exactly what I was wanting to end this note on. If you're looking for something that you can do musically, all of us, well, not all of us, I don't know if you have. Well, I know you have. You live in Las Vegas. Have done gigs where we're sitting there, we're playing, and there's somebody rotten, stinking drunk about 5 feet from us or 10 feet from us, and they're going, "Play Danny Boy. Come play it again." I already played it. Play it again. You look at that if you're living that music life, and you go, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here with my talent? Or you might be just like making song after song and putting it to Pond 5 and saying, nobody is picking this up. What good is this music at all? What is good as my talents? And I think we've both experienced the the satisfaction and the kind of job well done type thing, that doing something for good. And the church isn't the only place you can do things for good. You could go out and play at homeless centers for people. You could go play at senior citizen homes, and you could go play for weddings and play for funerals and really be a help to people as well. So it's not just the church that does this, but there is that sense of doing something for not just for your soul or salvation or whatever, but for everyone else's, and for and the feeling that you've done something on this earth that was worthwhile. Yes, you got paid, and you probably didn't get paid as much as you could. It's not much different than teaching. I think working as a teacher and working as a church worker are very similar type things. And I do feel when I see students come back and say, "You wouldn't believe what's happened," and they tell me that what happened as a result of me helping them start their journey. So that's very helpful. So.
Absolutely.
Well, Shane, thank you so much, man. This has been fantastic. Exactly what I wanted on this channel. And I hope this has been helpful for all of you folks out there. And again, Shane, thanks so much. And we'll see you very soon, my friend.
Okay. Very good.
Thanks.